her once bright eyes closed for the last time. The nurses had stopped checking her room as often in recent weeks. She had grown quieter, needing less, asking for almost nothing. But in the silence of her final breath, there was no one to hold her hand, no one to whisper goodbye. She died as she had lived in recent years, alone, faded into the background, easily overlooked. Outside the brittle walls of Haven Pines Care Center, life continued as usual. There were no headlines, no social media posts, no family gathered in tears. Just a brief call to a funeral home and an impersonal death certificate filled out by a nurse who barely knew her middle name. A week later, under a gray sky threatening rain, 3 sharply dressed individuals gathered at the edge of an empty cemetery. James Ward, the eldest, stood stiffly near the casket, eyes hidden behind expensive sunglasses, phone buzzing silently in his coat pocket. A corporate consultant with a surgically constructed life, James hadn't spoken to his mother in over 2 years, not since she had embarrassed him at a gala by asking for help with her rent. Next was Celeste, Lillian's middle child. She arrived late, smelling of designer perfume and carefully feigned remorse. Celeste had built a modest brand as a wellness influencer. Her voice soft, her photos filtered, her real life meticulously edited. When her mother began slipping into the shadows of memory and frailty, Celeste quietly unfollowed. And lastly, there was Nora, the youngest, who stood with arms folded, jaw clenched, wearing her grief like armor. She had been the closest to Lillian once, years ago. But after a brutal falling out over a man, over money, or maybe both, she stopped returning her mother's calls. It had been over a year. No tears were shed that morning. The service was short. A preacher mispronounced Lillian's maiden name. No music played. But just as the casket was being lowered, an unfamiliar man in a dark coat stepped forward from the nearby road. "I apologize for the intrusion," he said, voice low but firm. "My name is Malcolm Reed. I'm the executor of Mrs. Ward's will." James looked up sharply. Celeste raised a brow. Nora narrowed her eyes. "I was instructed to deliver a message," Malcolm continued, removing a sealed envelope from his coat. "Lillian requested that her children receive this together, and only after she was buried. She made it very clear, this is the beginning, not the end." The 3 siblings exchanged glances. Confusion, annoyance, suspicion flickering like lightning between them. Malcolm handed the envelope to James, then stepped back with the quiet poise of someone who knew more than he was saying. James hesitated. The envelope felt oddly heavy in his hands. He almost opened it then and there, but something in Nora's gaze made him stop. Not here, not yet. As the casket disappeared into the earth, the wind picked up, rustling the bare trees. Celeste shivered. The silence that had followed Lillian's death was beginning to fracture. Something was coming, and it had her name written all over it. 3 days after Lillian Ward was buried beneath a headstone that read, "Beloved Mother, Quiet Warrior," her children found themselves seated in a mahogany-paneled conference room at the law offices of Malcolm and Stowe. The air was still, save for the occasional tick of a grandfather clock and the steady hum of the ceiling fan above. The siblings had not sat this close to one another in years, not since their last family Christmas, which ended with Nora slamming a door and James booking an early flight back to New York. James sat at the end of the table, checking emails on his phone with one hand and sipping an espresso with the other. He hadn't even taken off his coat. Celeste, in a cream pantsuit too pristine for mourning, toyed with a silver ring on her finger, eyes darting between her siblings with mild disdain. She looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, and probably had a live stream scheduled that evening. Nora sat across from them both, her expression unreadable. She was the only one without makeup, dressed plainly, almost defiantly unbothered by appearances, but her foot tapped under the table, betraying her nerves. Malcolm Reed entered quietly, carrying a sleek black folder and a small wooden box. "Thank you all for coming," he began, taking a seat at the head of the table. "As Lillian's appointed executor, I'll be overseeing the execution of her final wishes." "She barely had anything to leave behind," James muttered under his breath. Malcolm didn't look up. You might be surprised. He opened the folder slowly. Your mother left behind a will, yes. But she also left behind instructions. And those instructions are unconventional. Celeste arched a brow. Unconventional how? Malcolm set down the folder and opened the wooden box. Inside were 4 sealed envelopes, numbered in black ink. Lillian requested that the contents of her estate not be revealed all at once. Instead, she left a series of timed letters, one to be read each week, together over the course of the next month. Nora leaned forward. Why? Malcolm looked each of them in the eye before answering. She believed that the truth shouldn't be handed to you. It should be earned, James scoffed. Truth? This is some kind of emotional scavenger hunt? No, Malcolm said calmly. It's a reckoning. He handed them the first envelope, marked week 1. If any one of you refuses to return for the next readings, you forfeit your claim to the estate. That was your mother's condition. Celeste frowned. Is that even legal? Perfectly, Malcolm said. Your mother was thorough. She had time to be. A beat of silence passed. Nora finally broke it. So we're all locked in? Yes, Malcolm said. And what you uncover in these letters, her words, her truths, may change how you see her. And yourselves. James, reluctantly intrigued, opened the envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper, written in Lillian's unmistakable cursive. You let me die in silence. Now you'll hear every word I never got to say. Week by week, lie by lie. And by the end, only one of you will truly know what I've done. And why. No one spoke. The silence in the room grew heavy, not with grief, but with dread. Something had begun, and none of them were ready for it. They reconvened 1 week later, just as instructed. The conference room was darker this time, a storm pressing against the windows like a presence waiting to be let in. Rain streaked the glass, and thunder rumbled distantly. Malcolm sat at the head of the table once again, the second sealed envelope resting in front of him like a loaded weapon. The air between the siblings had shifted, subtly but undeniably. James looked more tense, Celeste more performative, Nora more guarded. No one mentioned the contents of the first envelope since they last saw each other. But no one forgot it either. Malcolm didn't offer pleasantries. He slid the envelope forward and said simply, "Your mother's first letter." James reached for it, then paused, glancing at his sisters. "Should I read it out loud?" "Please," said Nora flatly. He opened the envelope. The letter was longer than the last, pages of handwritten prose in Lillian's elegant script. James cleared his throat and began, "You didn't notice the day I stopped waiting for your calls." The room fell still. "It happened slowly. First, I made excuses for you. You were busy, tired, distracted. Then I started answering my own questions out loud, because I knew no one else would. Eventually, I stopped talking altogether." Celeste shifted uncomfortably. "You called me dramatic, too sensitive, a burden. When I asked for help, you gave me advice instead of action. When I cried, you said I was trying to manipulate you, so I learned to cry silently, privately, invisibly." Nora stared at the table. James read on, his voice tightening. "But I was never blind. I saw you all slipping away, first emotionally, then physically. I watched you edit me out of your lives like a messy sentence. I watched the home I gave everything to build fall silent with absence. I watched myself become disposable. But here's the part one needs you to hear. I remember what you did." James stopped reading. "Go on," said Nora quietly. "You think I forgot that night in 1998 when one of you lied to the others about the money? You think I don't know how the second one covered it up? And the third? The third said nothing at all. You thought I was too broken to notice. But I noticed everything." A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows. Celeste sat upright. "What money?" she asked sharply, looking between her siblings. James said nothing. Nora's jaw clenched. Malcolm cleared his throat. There's more. James flipped the page, scanning ahead. I'm not writing to punish you. I'm writing so you'll finally see yourselves clearly, as I did in those final years, when the silence was louder than your voices ever were. One of you betrayed blood. One of you profited from it. And one of you let it happen. You know who you are. The others will find out soon enough. James lowered the letter, his hand trembling slightly. No one spoke. The accusation hovered in the air like smoke. Impossible to see, but choking them all the same. Celeste's face was pale now, and James was visibly sweating. Nora leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. So? Celeste snapped. Who is she talking about? But no one answered, because even if they didn't know exactly what Lillian meant, they all felt it. That creeping, familiar fear, that the past they buried was clawing its way out of the grave. And this was only the first letter. They came back the following week, but the mood had changed, grown colder, more defensive. The storm that had loomed the week before had passed, but it left something behind, not in the air, but in them. James arrived early and alone, clearly agitated. Celeste came 15 minutes late and refused to make eye contact. Nora wore the same boots as before, scuffed from the gravel outside, and sat with her back slightly turned from the others. The envelope waited on the table like a dare. This one was thicker. Malcolm sat silently for a long moment, then placed it between them. Your mother wanted this one read slowly. Nora reached for it without hesitation. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pulled out the pages. And something else. A weathered, leather-bound journal. She blinked. Is this Dad's? Malcolm nodded. Found in your mother's things. She instructed it to be given to you only after this particular letter was opened. James scoffed. Now we're digging up his old scribbles? The man's been dead 20 years. Apparently, Malcolm said quietly, not everything buried stays buried. Nora began reading. You loved your father, so did I. At first, Daniel Ward was charm wrapped in iron. You only saw the charm. You were too young to see the nights he didn't come home. The times I found strange receipts in his coat. You were asleep when he whispered lies into my ear and left for business trips that lasted weeks. James frowned. What is she talking about? Dad never. Nora ignored him and continued. He had a second life, not just an affair. A life, a home, a woman, and I suspect a child. Celeste gasped softly. I stayed silent. Because in those days, women didn't leave. They endured. I told myself I could protect you from the truth. But what I didn't know then was that lies grow legs. They walk into your future and become part of your children's bones. I started finding his journals. Scattered, half-hidden, fragments of thoughts he didn't want anyone to read. But I read them all. Nora opened the journal beside her. The handwriting was unmistakably Daniel's, rigid, slanted, meticulous. April 1994. She's asking questions again. I have to be more careful. Renee's getting nervous. The boy's getting older. He looks too much like me now. Celeste looked like she'd been slapped. Who the hell is Renee? No one answered. James leaned forward, staring at the journal, as if the ink might dissolve into truth if he just stared hard enough. Another entry, July 1996. I told Lillian I was in Phoenix. I was actually in Portland. With them. I can't do this forever. But I also can't let go. You remember him as a father, Nora continued reading, but I came to know him as a stranger. And maybe you should too. Because if what I believe is true, then there's someone out there, a sibling, whose blood runs through his veins, and through yours. Silence. Thick, heavy, unyielding. Malcolm reached for a sealed envelope tucked beneath the journal. She included this as well, a name. He slid it forward, but didn't open it. She said you weren't ready to see it. Not yet. Not until next week. She wanted the seed planted, the suspicion to grow. James stood abruptly. This is absurd. She's manipulating us. From beyond the grave. Nora didn't flinch. Or maybe she's finally telling the truth. The one we never bothered to ask for. Celeste stared at the journal like it might catch fire. What if it's someone we already know? No one answered. Because deep down, each of them was already replaying memories, interactions, faces, looking for clues that were never meant to be seen. Lillian hadn't just left them letters. She'd opened a door. And now the ghosts were walking in. By the time they returned the next week, the atmosphere between the Ward siblings had mutated. Something had shifted in them, subtly at first, then sharply. Their eyes didn't settle on one another for long. Their greetings were hollow, movements stiff. Even the receptionist noted the tension when she buzzed Malcolm's office. "Your guests have arrived. Again." Inside the conference room, the fourth envelope sat alone on the table, flanked by a new item. A sealed manila folder marked confidential DNA results. Malcolm didn't touch it. He merely looked at them and said, "Your mother wanted you to read this one together." And immediately. James stayed standing, arms crossed. Celeste perched at the edge of her chair like she might flee at any moment. Nora, for the first time, looked tired. Malcolm slid the envelope toward her. "She asked that you read this one, Nora." Nora nodded grimly and opened the envelope. "By now, you've read Daniel's journal. You've begun to suspect what I lived with for decades. There was another woman, another child, a life built in the shadows while we were scraping by in the light. I found the truth after he died. In letters. In receipts. In the face of a child I wasn't supposed to see." Nora's voice faltered slightly. James looked away. "That child, your sibling, exists. And not just as a distant figure on paper. They are here, among you. Someone you've spoken to, shaken hands with, maybe even trusted." Celeste gasped. "What?" "No, she wouldn't." Nora kept reading. "I arranged a private DNA test before I passed. It confirmed what I already knew in my bones. You are 4. And looked to Malcolm, who gently pushed the manila folder toward her. "She wanted you to open that now." Nora peeled back the flap slowly, heart pounding. Inside, a single sheet of paper, a DNA comparison between James, Celeste, Nora, and a fourth profile marked only Subject X. She read aloud, "A 99.97% likelihood of shared parentage with Subject X. Full sibling match to Daniel Ward. Maternal match. Inconclusive." James's brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" "Inconclusive?" Malcolm answered softly. "It means Subject X was not tested against Lillian's DNA, which means the fourth sibling was not born to her." Celeste stood. "This is insane. You're telling me there's someone out there who has our blood, who could be in this town, walking around, knowing the truth while we're sitting here in the dark?" "Yes," Malcolm said, "and according to Lillian, you've all crossed paths with them before." A beat of silence. James stared at the paper. "So we're supposed to just guess who it is?" Nora's voice was cold. "No, we're supposed to remember, because now everything felt different. The neighbors they grew up around, old family friends, teachers, even past lovers. Any one of them could be the hidden sibling, the forgotten heir. The product of a betrayal. You always thought you were 3, Nora read from the final line of the letter. But I knew the truth. The past is never content with being buried. It finds its way back. Through blood, through silence, through the person standing right in front of you." Celeste stood, pacing. "This isn't a letter. It's psychological warfare." James was already flipping through his mental Rolodex, questioning every shared glance, every family gathering, every coincidence. Nora said nothing, but in her mind, one face came to the surface, a face that didn't belong in their family album but had lingered too long on its edges. One of them might already know the fourth sibling, and that sibling might already know everything. The conference room felt colder than ever when they returned. The air was thick with suspicion and dread, the weight of what they were about to uncover pressing down like a storm cloud ready to burst. No one spoke as Malcolm placed the sixth envelope on the table. It seemed almost to pulse with the energy of the unspoken sins it held. "Your mother's tone changes in this letter," Malcolm said quietly. "She moves from grief to accusation." Nora's eyes flickered with a mix of fear and defiance. "Let's get it over with." James unfolded the letter with trembling hands, the ink on the page stark and unyielding. "I trusted you. I sacrificed everything for you, my youth, my health, my dreams, and you repaid me with silence, betrayal, and greed. James, you hid your father's investments, diverting money that should have supported me in my final years." James stiffened, the color draining from his face. "That's not true. Celeste, you used my illness to boost your image, pretending to care while signing deals behind my back." Celeste's jaw tightened, her eyes flashing. "You don't know what you're talking about. Nora, you chose to abandon me when I needed you most. You let me fight alone in that hospital room, and you lied about it afterward." Nora's fists clenched, but she said nothing. James swallowed hard, voice barely above a whisper. "You're twisting things." The letter continued. "One of you made a decision that almost cost me my life, a decision I kept secret to protect the family. But secrets don't stay buried forever, and if the truth comes out, it will destroy everything you've built." The room was silent except for the steady ticking of the clock. Each sibling wrestled with the weight of their guilt, unspoken truths clawing to be heard. Malcolm finally broke the silence. "Your mother knew. She wanted you to confess, to face what you did, because only then would justice be possible." Celeste's voice cracked. I never meant to hurt her." James shook his head. "Neither did I." Nora's eyes met theirs, fierce and unyielding. "Then why did we let her die alone?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswerable, because beneath the surface of their polished lives lay fractures. Fractures Lillian had seen and exploited in her final, quiet rebellion. And as the siblings sat there, the first true cracks in their alliance began to widen. The siblings' fragile facade was beginning to crumble. When they entered the law office this time, the usual polite distance was replaced by sharp glances, barely concealed suspicion, and clenched jaws. Malcolm sat at the head of the table, a new envelope beside a thick folder embossed with the emblem of a prestigious bank. "Your mother was very clear," he began, voice steady but grave. "Her estate isn't what it appears to be. That modest house, that old car, the handful of savings. It was all a smokescreen." Celeste's eyes narrowed. "So what? She hid money? Big deal." "Not just money," Malcolm said, sliding the folder across the table. "Assets, accounts, investments, all carefully concealed. And they're tied to a final clue, one that requires cooperation to unlock." James leaned forward. "Cooperation? After everything?" "I don't think so." Malcolm nodded. "That's exactly what your mother anticipated." He opened the folder to reveal several letters and documents, coded and redacted. "Each of you has a piece of the puzzle. Alone, your inheritance is locked, but together, working as a family, you can access the full estate." Nora's voice was low, laced with skepticism. "So if one of us breaks ranks, they lose their share?" "Correct," Malcolm said. "And your mother made it very clear. Any attempt to sabotage the process will forfeit your claim entirely." Celeste scoffed. "She's playing us, pitting us against each other, but she's also forcing us to confront each other," Nora said, eyes sharp. "That's the point." James clenched his fists. "So now we're prisoners to her last game. Just great." Malcolm's gaze was steady. "Your mother's final act wasn't just about money, it was about justice, about making sure the truth comes out. And the only way to get there is by uniting or losing everything." As the siblings exchanged glances, the fragile truce stretched thin. Celeste's voice cut through the tension. "Fine. We play her game. But don't expect me to trust either of you. James's laugh was bitter. Trust? That ship sank a long time ago. Nora's eyes didn't waver. Then let's see who's left standing when it's over. The envelope sat in the middle of the table. A reminder, a challenge, a trap. Lillian's legacy was no longer just words on paper. It was a battlefield. The next meeting was unlike any before. Instead of sitting stiffly around the polished table, the siblings faced a presence that shattered the fragile balance of their world. Malcolm opened the door and gestured for someone to enter. The room fell into a stunned silence as a figure stepped inside, neither stranger nor outsider, but someone they all knew. Someone who had been quietly woven into their lives in ways they never imagined. "Meet your sister," Malcolm said simply. The woman's eyes flicked over James, Celeste, and Nora, a mix of sadness and defiance in her gaze. "I'm Evelyn," she said softly, voice steady despite the tension. "And I'm here because Mom wanted you to know the truth." James's face hardened. "This is a joke." Celeste's breath hitched. "How could Mom keep this from us?" Nora's hands clenched into fists. "Why now?" Evelyn took a deep breath. "Because it was never safe before. But Mom made sure I'd be protected. And she made sure I'd have a voice." She revealed documents, adoption papers, letters, photographs, all proof of her connection to Daniel Ward, but not Lillian. "I'm his daughter. His other daughter. The one you never knew." The room exploded with questions, accusations, and raw emotion. Celeste's voice was sharp. "Why didn't you come forward before?" Evelyn's eyes flashed. "Because I wasn't sure you'd accept me. Because I was afraid of what you might do, just like Mom was." James looked away, conflicted. Nora stared, searching Evelyn's face for something. Forgiveness? Revenge? Truth? Malcolm's voice cut through the chaos. "Evelyn has a share of the estate, as Lillian's will dictates. But more than that, she holds secrets your mother entrusted only to her." The siblings realized that Evelyn's arrival was more than a revelation. It was a turning point. Because now, the game was no longer just among three. It was among four. And Evelyn was playing to win. The envelope this time contained no letter, just a USB drive. Malcolm plugged it into a sleek monitor perched at the end of the table. The room dimmed as the screen flickered to life, revealing Lillian Ward, sitting upright in a worn but tidy armchair, wrapped in a faded shawl. The room behind her was simple, familiar. A vase of lavender sat beside her, already beginning to wilt. She looked older, frailer, but not weak. Her gaze pierced the camera like it knew exactly who would be watching, and what she wanted to say would burn. "If you're seeing this," she began, "then I'm gone. And you've made it far enough to hear me properly, not filtered through paper or someone else's voice, mine." Nora instinctively leaned forward. Celeste clutched the arm of her chair. James remained unnervingly still. Evelyn sat with her eyes fixed, unreadable. "You've received the letters. You've heard the accusations. Maybe you've argued. Maybe you've cried. But none of it matters until you understand why. I didn't just want to punish you. I wanted you to look each other in the eyes and finally see what you did. To me, to each other, and to yourselves." Her voice cracked just slightly before she continued. "James, I trusted you with our family's finances when I shouldn't have. You moved money, created barriers, told yourself it was for stability. But it left me stranded. You cut the cord and never looked back." James's jaw tensed, but he didn't deny it. "Celeste, you filmed my birthday from the hospital bed like it was content. You posted it for likes, and then you ghosted me for 8 weeks. I watched the views go up while I ate reheated soup in silence." Celeste looked down, a tear sliding past her perfectly painted lashes. "Nora, I know about the DNR form. I wasn't supposed to. But I saw your signature. I begged them not to let me go, You overruled me. That pain wasn't physical. It was betrayal. Nora's entire body went rigid. She asked me to. But her voice died in her throat. Lillian inhaled shakily, then turned toward the camera, more resolute than ever. And Evelyn, I didn't raise you. But I watched you grow. I kept your photos. I wrote to you even when I knew you might never read them. You were the ghost in the house, the whisper in every hallway. And I'm sorry you were born from deception, but not that you exist. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling instantly. Now, my final condition, my estate, the real one, will not go to the one who begs, pleads, or claims to deserve it. It will go to the one who chooses to walk away from it. Because only that person understands what it truly cost me to build it. The screen froze on her face. No music, no soft fade out, just Lillian's sharp gaze locked forever in pixel. Silence fell, not awkward, crushing. Revelation didn't bring them peace. It brought the truth. Raw and bloody. One of them would have to let go of the fortune to claim the legacy. And none of them wanted to be the one who gave up everything. The final envelope was small, unassuming. No letter, no USB, no flourish of explanation, just a single, tarnished brass key. Malcolm placed it carefully on the table between the four siblings. Your mother's last instruction was simple, he said. Open the safety deposit box this key belongs to. Together, what's inside will explain everything. No one spoke. James finally reached out and picked up the key. It was colder than expected. Later that day, under a gray sky that threatened rain once more, as if the world itself was bracing for impact, they arrived at Branford First National Bank. The manager, already informed and prepared, led them down into the vault. Box number 2413 sat near the bottom row, dull and silent, but somehow pulsing with tension. James inserted the key. Click. The metal slid open with a groan. Inside there was no money, no documents, no title deeds. Just a single velvet pouch and an old cassette tape, labeled in Lillian's steady script. Play me where truth can't be ignored. They returned to Lillian's abandoned house, untouched since her death. Dust still clung to the curtains. A photo of her and Daniel on their wedding day sat crooked on the mantel. Nora found an old tape player in the attic and dusted it off. They pressed play. The tape crackled. Then Lillian's voice emerged, softer but clearer than ever before. If you've made it here, then you've walked through fire. Good. Because now I'm going to show you the part one couldn't write down. She went silent for a beat. Then, years ago, I discovered something Daniel left behind. A confession. Not to me, but to someone else. Someone he trusted with his real truth. There was a soft rustling. A click. And then, another voice came through the tape. Familiar, but not Lillian's, and not Daniel's. It was James. Look, I only did what I had to. The money was sitting there. She wouldn't have even noticed if I hadn't been caught. And if we all play dumb, she'll never know it was me. Celeste's head snapped toward him. Nora's mouth fell open. Evelyn just stared. Lillian's voice resumed. That recording was from 15 years ago. Hidden in an old voicemail box Daniel forgot to delete. I found it. Copied it. And waited. James, you stole from me. Then you let your sisters take the fall when everything collapsed. Nora lost her job covering my bills. Celeste sold herself to brands that mocked our family. All while you sat behind your polished office doors, playing innocent. James stood, furious. That's taken out of. And yet, Lillian's voice interrupted, eerily timed. You still think you deserve anything I left behind. Another beat of silence. But here's the truth. The real estate, the trust, the investments, they're gone. I liquidated everything 6 months before I died. Gasps filled the room. And I donated it. to battered women's shelters, to hospice care centers, to every lonely mother whose children forgot her name. What you're left with is the truth. Inside the velvet pouch was a faded family photo torn in half. Daniel's side ripped clean away. And behind it, a final note. Let this be your inheritance. The truth you buried is now the house you must live in. But if you ever find each other again, really find each other, maybe then the legacy won't be money. Maybe it'll be mercy. James sat in stunned silence. Celeste wept. Nora quietly left the room. Only Evelyn remained standing, staring at the photo. A woman born of betrayal, yet chosen by Lillian to carry the truth forward. Because in the end, Lillian hadn't written a will. She had written a reckoning. And it had been signed in silence, sealed in suffering, and delivered in perfect vengeance.